Stay right where you are because it's time for GeorgiaCarry.org Radio with Doug and Jesse King. GeorgiaCarry.org is Georgia's no-compromise voice for gun owners. Stay tuned for valuable information on protecting your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And now, your host for GeorgiaCarry.org Radio, Doug and Jesse King.
Hello, Georgia. You're listening to GeorgiaCarry.org Radio. We are live today talking with Jerry Henry, the Executive Director of Georgia Carry. Of course, I am Doug King, your host, along with Jesse King, my beautiful wife and co-host, your voice of Georgia Carry on the radio waves today. And we have an exciting show. This is our inaugural show, our first time kicking off our presentation to you guys about everything that's going on statewide, nationwide, and how it affects your gun rights here in Georgia. You know, we're a little different radio program than things that you might have heard before. We take a local interest in things that are happening, you know, from Waycross all the way to Valdosta, Tifton to Savannah, Augusta to Atlanta. These are the places of Georgia that where our listeners congregate, where people have real issues and real problems in the gun carrying community. And of course, GeorgiaCarry.org reaches out across the state to change the legislation, to make Georgia a better place, and to encourage people to exercise their fundamental God-given rights to carry a firearm in defense of themselves and others. As we get into our show today, you know, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, and we've got a lot of different varied topics across that we are hoping to bring in to our listening audience. We're not only going to be talking about, you know, gun rights issues, but we're going to eventually have some shows that will incorporate some ideas from local events, including gun shows or local tournaments. So if you own a gun range or have a shooting sports club or team that would like to be spotlighted on Georgia Carry Radio, just let us know. We have contact here at radio@georgiacarry.org, and you can reach out to us there. There's going to be some segments where we cover legislation that's coming up. You know, the Gold Dome is cooking away down there, serving up bills scattered, smothered, and covered every day during the legislative session, and we want to get down to the nitty-gritty basics of what's going on down there. Each week we're going to have a segment where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Can't wait for that.
And there's going to be some really important topics where we get to highlight things that are going right and things that are going very, very wrong here in Georgia and how they affect Georgians. And this is, you know, the primary focus of Georgia Carry Radio is to focus in on things that are affecting Georgia and Georgians. You know, there are lots of other news media outlets out there that are talking about, you know, Congress and the President, and some of the things that Congress and the President are doing are affecting us, and we're going to discuss them. But this is a Georgia-centric program where you can learn about things that are happening in Georgia, to Georgians, and for Georgia from GeorgiaCarry.org. I know we've got Jerry Henry sitting here with us today, too, and he's really excited to be here and ready to start discussing some of the things that are happening in the legislature. And I know that he's got a huge notebook here, folks, full of all of the bills that are coming up in our second segment, where we are going to dissect these legislative actions that are taking place around us. And Georgia Carry has really done a magnificent job since its inception in 2007 in getting the legislature to be responsive to the people.
Correct. We started off with 7 people. We're up to about 7,500 people, and about 8,500 people, members, and your voice is heard down at the Capitol, and they listen to what we have to say. We've been very fortunate in how we've changed the bills in those last almost 8 years now. Well, it is 8 years.
And this is a real grassroots organization where people come up from the local level to make a real difference. In our segment, our third segment, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, we're going to be showcasing how one of the bills went from being a downright ugly bill to being our bill of the week, basically, because of all of the action of the Georgia Carry members and the responsiveness of the legislators.
So I wasn't here in 2007, and I'm not sure what Georgia's laws were like before 2007.
Well, they were rated. We went through all the laws in each of the states and rated the state's gun laws. Georgia rated 39th worst at that time.
39th out of 50.
Out of 50. And we also had more locations off limits to carry than any other state because of our public gathering law. We had a public gathering law that was passed in 1870. Lasted 140 years before we got it repealed. It said you could not carry to or while at 5 different places. You couldn't have it in the parking lot if you were going to that place. If you were going to church, you couldn't have a gun in your parking lot if you were traveling to church, let alone if you were there. So we got that changed in 2010 through SB 308. And we made several other, there was another bill, HB 89, that we got passed in 2008, which gave us more liberties. SB 308 did more, and then last year we passed HB 60, which gave us even more. And according to a study that Guns and Ammo did, they rated the states as the best place to own a firearm, and Georgia was number 3. So we've made a little bit of impact in the last 8 years.
Well, we were really glad to get rid of that no carrying into the church thing, because Doug and I have an open carry wedding.
Yeah, that wasn't even that long ago. We were really reveling in a lot of the changes that have happened over the last 8 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about Georgia being a southern state and kind of a bulwark of good home values and family values and tradition.
Strong on liberty.
And strong on liberty. I mean, we are one of the states that have fielded libertarian candidates more than any other state. Mm-hmm. You see, influence of lobbying groups that are homegrown, not AstroTurf, but real, true, people who are involved in politics.
Right.
And you would think that of all the places, you think about, Massachusetts and California and New York and places where, gun rights are looked down upon.
Right.
And then you've got Georgia. You would think that we would be in the pantheon to begin with of gun rights, but we weren't.
We were not.
Not even close.
We were not even close. I can name you several of what we would refer to as liberal states that were a whole lot better. And in fact, Vermont is probably still better than we are, and I wouldn't think they're a conservative bastion. They have constitutional carry. They don't require a firearm. A license to carry a firearm, and there are just very few off-limits locations if you're old enough to own a firearm.
Well, I was reading online the other day that West Virginia has an open carry without a license. You can carry open, just not concealed without a license.
Have they? Oh, okay. And we've looked at that down here. We have not got it. I think there's 27 states, 26, 27, 28 states who do allow their citizens to carry openly without a license, but still require it for a concealed. And there are 5 states, I believe, that have constitutional carry that require no license whatsoever to carry.
Well, Alaska is where I had been the last couple of years. I don't know if you knew this, Jerry, but I'm a practicing attorney, and I was a district attorney up in Alaska. And while I was up there, that was one of the really driving points that I took from Alaska when I came back to Georgia. Was in Alaska, I didn't need a license. I had a Utah permit. I had a non-resident Utah permit if I was going to travel, which opened up a whole bunch of states for me. Mm-hmm. But while I was home in Alaska, I didn't need a license. I could carry open or concealed anywhere I wished to, and it was just based on the fact that I was a law-abiding citizen over the age of 21, and I could do what I well pleased.
Well, getting rid of the licenses is one of our long-term goals, as we have discussed before. We would like to see that go away. I look at it basically as a poll tax. If you remember back in the 60s until about, 1964, 65, you had a poll tax. You had to pay a poll tax to vote. In order to get your voter registration, you had to go down, fill out an application, and basically what that meant was that if you were white, you'd get one. If you weren't, you probably wouldn't get one.
Yeah. And, that's a great analogy, because I think that a lot of politicians who are against liberty, and it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're against liberty, then you're against the free exercise of your rights, and the easiest way to restrict a right is through taxation.
That's
and so
correct.
we see in some of these bills we're going to discuss in our next segment, things like training. When training becomes cost prohibitive or expensive, and who's to define what expensive is? Because for us, who live in Buckhead or in the nice parts of town, $100 may be no big deal to apply for a license or to get a training class. But if you're living, in Section 8 housing in downtown Atlanta and you make, $150 a month, $100 for a license and $300 for a training class suddenly has priced you out of exercising your God-given rights.
You're exactly right. And those people who do live in Section 8 housing, et cetera, matter of fact, that's one of the things that HB 60 touched last year, is that Section 8 housing cannot prohibit them from owning a firearm as part of the contract of the housing agreement. So We're aware of that. But you're right. There's a lot of people who just cannot come up with that extra. There's people between me and you that live in Buckhead that probably have trouble coming up with an extra $300 sometime because there's a lot of people that are living right on their means to begin with. And if you start throwing extra money on there, you're going to be hurting them.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And the people struggle from day to day anyway.
Oh, yeah, well,
so
especially in this economy.
$75 that you have to pay for the permit, it kind of bites you.
Well, that $75 is now just a one-time deal, though it used to be every time. But we got rid of the fingerprint requirement for a renewal now for the license, so it dropped back down to about $35.
And this is something else that we're going to discuss in detail in another segment, because that renewal rate is only good if right now, according to the current understanding of the law, if you stay in the same county for the rest of your life. If you move about in Georgia, then they start hitting you with that fee over and over again. So
that's the way the probate courts have decided to interpret HB 60,
which is unfortunate, but there is always a reaction. There's always a remedy for a judge who's not willing to follow the law. Folks, you are listening to GeorgiaCarry.org radio, and we will be back in just a minute to talk about everything that's going on underneath the Gold Dome right here on this your local station.
Now, back to GeorgiaCarry.org radio with Doug and Jesse King.
Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to GeorgiaCarry.org radio, and this week we have Jerry Henry, the Executive Director of GeorgiaCarry.org, in studio with us as we are discussing we just came out of a segment discussing past bills and some of the historic accomplishments of GeorgiaCarry.org here in the state and how they have completely changed the landscape of carrying a firearm in Georgia. And now we are looking ahead at this legislative session. And Jerry, I've got to be honest with you, it's a little bleak this year. There's not a whole lot of whiz-bang things happening underneath that gold dome. I made a joke in the initial segment that they were serving up the bills scattered, covered, and scattered. Scattered, covered, and smothered. That's right. And it seems like maybe they've been having a little bit too much time at the Waffle House versus getting a whole bunch of really important bills out there.
I think the only thing they're trying to smother over there is some of our rights, Doug.
I think if you look, most of them kind of want to rest from last year. Last year with HB 60 was a
big year.
A big, tough year. And I mean tough. Some of those guys went through pure hell trying to get that bill passed. And as you know, after it was passed, I mean, we had international news coverage all over the place. We had well, as a matter of fact, Alan Powell made a picture of Alan Powell made the front page of the New York Times and front page of the L.A. Times. And so, all the things
coming off of a year like that.
Coming off a year like that, everybody needs a rest. I'm telling you, we need a rest as well.
Well, we have how many active bills in the Assembly right now?
Right now, there's 8 that have been introduced. Active, probably 1, but there's 8 that have been introduced. And we can go over those right quick.
And I want to talk about each one in depth, but a lot of the bills this year, a lot of the ones that were introduced were bills that were really targeting GCO's members, and a lot of people's
HB 60.
Yeah,
and HB 60 from last year.
And so we kind of get tempted to rest on our laurels after a huge year like last year, where something amazing happened. But then the opposition never sleeps, does it?
No. One of the things that people say, and as a matter of fact, we had some of our founding fathers of GeorgiaCarry.org said, we'll go down, we'll change the laws, and then we'll go home and forget about it. Well, you can't do that. You can go change the laws, but you can't go home and forget about it because, as you say, somebody's going to be nipping at your heels all the time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of these nipping at your heels bills, because they're the ones that scare me the most.
I think the first one we've got is the HB 186, isn't it?
Well, 186 basically was, I think that was an error in judgment when it was put in. That was last year, HB 826 was introduced and passed almost unanimously in the House, only 2 votes against it in the Senate. And the purpose of that bill was to do away with zero tolerance, or at least put some sanity in zero tolerance practices. Right now, if a child is found with if a student's found with a knife in his car, even if it's in his tackle box and locked in the back, in the trunk of the car, if they find it, then they have to call the law on him, and he can get charged with a felony. And what this does, what HB 826 did was take that out of the hands of the law and put it in the hands of the school and let the school decide what they wanted to do. If they felt that the guy was there with a knife to do damage to people, do harm to people, then they could charge him as a felon. But otherwise, it's just a mistake. They can suspend him, something along those lines, and say, if you do it again,
Well, that sounds like a really good bill to have.
Sure. Zero tolerance, in my opinion, means zero brains. You don't have to think. You just do what this paper says, and you go. This allows the school board to set their policies on those, and it takes that definition of weapon out of the code section.
Okay.
Okay. So that makes it a little bit easier. It's not nearly so bad. And HB 186, 826 was supposedly overshadowed by 860 last year, and did away with that particular section. So what the Representative Setzler did was he went and took the same sections that he was trying to get last year, copied it, put it in the bill, and went.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that sounded good, except that when we started looking at it last year, all those things that were in this bill were exempted if you had a Georgia weapons license. This year they weren't. So when we found that out, we said, oh, wait a minute, we cannot stand for this. And we came in after they had a hearing in the subcommittee. We discussed what we were going to do. We said we've got to oppose this bill, and we sent out an email in the afternoon saying we were opposed to this bill.
I got that update.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is where, the grassroots really takes effect.
That's
where
correct.
we get into the nitty-gritty of these bills.
I also got some phone calls about 8 o'clock that night, said we're working on it for tomorrow's hearing. And the next day, when they had another hearing, it was a hearing only, they didn't vote it out of the committee or what, the bill was acceptable to us. So because of the fact that GeorgiaCarry.org members got active, started contacting the people we told them to contact, we got some action done there. So,
now, this isn't, you calling up the senator. This isn't, the executive committee of Georgia Carry calling him up.
This is the members of Georgia Carry, the people who do the work. Everybody gives me and the board of directors the credit. We don't do that. The members are the ones that get this done.
And this is simply done by calling the phone numbers that were
correct.
in
calling
the email,
phone
and I got
numbers
this email.
and emailing them and saying we can't do this.
And when they call in, and this is one of the hallmarks, because I've done a little lobbying here and there. I've talked to legislatures before and heard their responses. The deal is when Georgia Carry starts calling, they're respectful, they're educated, and they're firm.
That's correct. That's what we tell everybody, and you'll notice in just about every email that we send out, when we say contact your representatives, contact your senator, the lieutenant governor, whoever we want you to contact, we tell you to be polite and firm and tell them what you want to see happen. We do not want anybody down there screaming and hollering and calling them all kinds of names and saying, I'm never going to vote for you again if you do that. That doesn't work. If you talk to people like they're human beings, they've got a job that they're elected to do, and they're trying to do their jobs, and you give them your input, then you've done your job. So we do that. So 186, that was basically what that is about, and it's still about that, trying to decriminalize the some of the weapons at school. And it has passed our muster now, and if it comes up again in a hearing, we will support that bill. Not sure whether that'll happen or not, but we will support that bill. HB 331 is to require completion of training within 120 days of issuance of weapons carry license.
All right, now I've got real issues with this.
Oh, I do too. This was introduced by Dexter Sharper, a Democrat from 177th District. Basically, they would require training course to be given by the sheriff's office once every 60 days. It would be free to gun owners, and prior to applying for GWL, or you'd be enacted a $25 civil fine.
So they're going to fine you, or they're going to fine the taxpayers, because eventually, ultimately, the taxpayers are the ones that would end up paying for the training.
You'll be paying for my training. And the training course, as there's another bill here in the Senate, the training course is unspecified, basically. It says that it must contain this, but it doesn't say what it has to do, the length of time, etc. So we, of course, are against that, and I don't expect anything to happen on that bill.
Yeah, I look at a lot of things that government requires training for, and none of them are really running well or are managed well. You look at the DMV, you look at DUI classes, you look at all of these things, driver's ed that are state mandated training courses, and they're not exactly the pinnacle of the kind of training that you would hope to get in a life or death situation.
No, they're not.
We're getting really close to a commercial break.
About 2.5 minutes.
So we've got a couple more really good bills.
Okay, we can carry over to the next section. I want to say in this, I want everybody to understand this, that we have long been a supporter of training, and we continue to be a supporter of training. But everybody doesn't need the same training. You need some training. I need some training.
I need
Jessica
more.
needs some training, and we want you to decide what it is.
And we want you to be engaged and happy with
That's
it.
correct.
Too, because
correct.
When you're forced to go to a training class, like let's say a DUI class or a defensive driving class or one of these other required forced trainings, you go and watch the people who are in this environment. They're mad at being there. They're not listening. They're just trying to punch their card or ticket, and that's not the training we need.
Have you ever looked around a job orientation?
Oh my goodness!
Like seriously, looked around at the people at your job orientation. Even if it's just a seasonal job, and see how many of those people are actually paying attention. You got a guy that's doodling on the desk, and you got a guy that's texting,
playing
and
Angry Birds.
There's somebody twiddling their thumbs. Nobody's actually listening to the person that's talking, and that's what would happen at these training classes.
Another thing is, if the government says this is the training that you need, when you get through, you have all the training you need. Why would you ever go and get any more training? Because the government has just set you up to take care of yourself in all situations.
And the next argument will be, well, if you go and get more training, then are you making yourself somehow like a lethal weapon, or are you going to above and beyond, or could this be used to increase your liability, saying that you had greater abilities than an average person? I mean, and I think that those arguments are completely BS in every way, shape, and form. But when the government has laid out what is enough training, then who's to say,
I agree.
So it's a terrible idea.
I don't want the government deciding what kind of training I need to handle my firearm. Sorry.
Or anything else.
I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. All right.
Time we got?
So we got 1 minute. Let's talk about HB 492 for a second.
Well, HB 492, we probably need a little more time on that. But this basically clarifies some of what was in HB 60.
Okay.
They weren't mistakes, but it's the way they were written up, basically, and interpreted by others. Right now, we were talking about doing away with the renewals, with fingerprints on renewals. The probate courts read HB 60 to say that unless that GWO was issued in their county, then it's not a renewal. It's a new license. So this says anywhere you have one, if you have one that's valid, it's good and it's renewal no matter where you go.
So we're coming up on this commercial break. When we get back, we'll continue discussing 492.
All right. Folks, you're listening to GeorgiaCarry.org radio right here on your local station. Tune back in just a moment for continuing discussion on all of the bills underneath the Gold Dome.
And now, back to GeorgiaCarry.org radio with Doug and Jesse King.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to GeorgiaCarry.org radio, and we have been having a detailed discussion about all the bills that are underneath the Gold Dome this season with Executive Director Jerry Henry. And when we had left, we were just starting to discuss a bill that will clarify GeorgiaCarry.org's position on renewals of Georgia weapons licenses. And this is important because right now the probate judges who are in charge of issuing the Georgia weapons licenses are interpreting the law to say that unless you stay in the same county all your life, it's not a renewal of your license, even if you've had one forever.
That's correct.
And so that's not a very good reading of what HB 60 last year was intending.
The problem with what happened last year, it's the old saying about if you watch sausage being made, you won't ever eat any sausage. Well, if you watch laws being made, you kind of start thinking about sausage. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, we had to do some changing around last year to get HB 60 passed. HB 60 started off as HB 875, and when they made one of the changes, there were some lines that weren't lined through. And so you could read it basically either way you wanted to, because there were a couple of lines should have been struck out that would have clarified it, and that's what we're doing now, is clarifying that. And it was too late, as everything rolled through the General Assembly last year, it was too late to get some of those things done because it would require too many vote changes, etc.
And it's much easier to go back to the legislature and have it amended than to start to fight this out and take it to the Georgia Supreme Court.
Yes, as long as it's not taking away any of your rights, I agree with that. And this really wasn't.
So it just causes people to have to pay another fee when they renew.
Another fingerprint renewal, 42.25 or something like that. But a couple other things it does is right now, if you look in the off-limits places, it says in a government building. This would say in a government building as a non-license holder. Okay. So if you're in there with a non-license holder, you're in trouble.
So this would make you able to carry a gun into the courthouse with your license?
Not in a courthouse. Courthouse is off-limits because a courthouse is not defined as a government building.
Okay.
Clarifies carrying a gun within 150 foot of a polling place is off-limits only during an election.
Okay.
Instead of it being
all
forever.
the time. Yeah,
even if it's never
somebody says, well, that's a polling place, you're within 150 feet, I go arrest you. Well, unless there's an election going on, it doesn't matter. And then, of course, the license. It adds a definition of armed forces
that's
as
an
to
important
what
thing.
is the armed forces.
As I remember having arguments about this back in the day.
Yeah, Georgia National Guard, the Georgia
State Defense Force.
Yes, all those. It is confusing to some point, and it's confusing to the law, or the law enforcement, which is what really bothers us more than anything.
Confusing to prosecutors.
Yep. And it adds a provision for the courts to notify the probate court of a license holder who is convicted of a crime, which would make the license holder ineligible to have a GWL, so that it would be revoked. If you kill somebody in Fulton County and your license is in Cherokee County, guess what? You're going to lose your license. But you're not going to have to worry about it because you're probably going to be, off at the big house somewhere anyway.
I think that this is an important point to bring up because a lot of people will sit out there and say, GeorgiaCarry.org, they're a gun rights group. All they care about is to strike down every gun law and create the Wild West. But that's not it at all.
Nope.
We're looking to protect good, law-abiding citizens.
Correct.
And allow them to exercise their rights. Now, when you cross over to that other side and you're no longer a law-abiding citizen, you're not going to get any protection from GCO or from any other reputable gun rights group.
That's correct. Too late. You got to do it beforehand. It allows a probate court or probate judge to verify the validity of a license via subpoena or court order. So if you're in one county, then they have to go through the court system. Right now, nobody can really tell you who's got a valid license and who hadn't, except the probate court that issued it. Mm-hmm. So they have to go through the certain procedure to be able to get that even from them. The judge just can't call up and say, hey, give me this. Or the chief of police can't call up. It has to be proper done. And it changed the definition of weapon in 1611-129. I don't have that definition with me, but it did away with a 2-inch knife. Mm-hmm. It's right now the definition of weapon in 129 is the same as that in 1611-127.1, which is the school carry, which is a whole lot tighter than what we had. So it did that. That bill, in my opinion, is the only bill that has a chance to pass this year, and it was just introduced last week. So it has to be on the fast track because day 30 is coming up pretty quick.
Yeah,
but that has some pretty powerful people on it. Alan Powell co-signed it. John Meadows co-signed it. Rick Jasper wrote the bill. Dusty Hightower, Mandy Ballinger, and Jay Roberts were all instrumental in getting HB 60 passed last year. So that bill may very well come about.
Now, folks, I know that you hear things like this bill's important and it needs to be fast-tracked, and we're coming up on the crossover day, and here's the point. You wonder, how do I get involved? How do I get into this? And who do I need to call? Well, all of this information is on our website at GeorgiaCarry.org. You go to GeorgiaCarry.org and you can get a plain language listing of all of these bills and what they mean and what they do, who you need to contact, when the hearing dates pop up. And we'd love to be able to tell you every day when the hearing dates were coming up, but they're not published a week in advance.
No.
They're not able to
No.
make all of our airtime.
No.
So
No.
we can't give them to you in a real-time basis like we can on the website. So we encourage you, every day or two, check out the website to see when if you're in the Atlanta area and you want to come down to the Capitol and talk to people or see these laws being made. If you want some of Jerry Henry's sausage made right in front of you, you can come down to the Capitol if you're in the Atlanta area and see when it's happening if you keep your eye on the GeorgiaCarry.org website.
Well, it is important that we do that and keep up with these bills, et cetera. And I would add that sometimes we're lucky to find out the afternoon before the hearing the next day.
And that's when the email updates come in.
That's when we get notified, and then we have to notify people when it's going to be.
Right, and so when you've got those last-minute things, you don't even have time to get it up on the website, so you email out to the members. And now every single person who's listening to our voice today can go to GeorgiaCarry.org and see all of this information. None of it's members only. Yep. You don't have to punch in a password to get into this inside information. Yep. But when there's stuff that's happening minute by minute, like changes in the hearing dates, changes in the schedules, or new things being added, the only way you're going to get that information is from a GeorgiaCarry.org mini update. And those come out through email to all of the members.
Moving right along. That's all in the House. And as I said, HB 492 is probably the only one that has a very good chance of passing. The other bills are from the Senate. SB 48, carrying and possession of firearms prohibit restoration of gun rights to person who have been convicted of a forcible felony.
Now,
that's Vincent Fort.
I think that is absolutely unconstitutional.
Oh, I do too, no doubt about it. Because if you get a pardon, we're going to give you a pardon with everything except that in Georgia. Mm-hmm. Anywhere else you get one. The way I read this bill, even if the president pardons you, you're still out.
And the way
that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The way I'm looking at it, it's that the legislature, which is an independent branch of government, is going to restrict the ability of the executive through the Board of Pardons and Paroles, which is an independent body under the Georgia Constitution. This is a really important fact because people think, there's three branches of government. There's the executive, there's the legislative, there's the judicial. They're independent of each other. No one can control the other three. Well, in Georgia, there's actually a fourth branch of government called the Board of Pardons and Paroles. It is a separate and co-equal branch made by the Georgia Constitution. And here the legislature is implying that they can strip that board of one of its enumerated powers under the Georgia Constitution, which is absolutely absurd.
That one is put in by Senator Fort and has little to no chance of passing. They may get a hearing, but it probably won't come out of the hearing. SB 49 is also by Vincent Fort. He wants to repeal the statute relating to no duty to retreat prior to the use of force.
When I read this one, I was blown away.
Well, that's something that he has been trying to do for quite some time. Everybody wants to throw the Trayvon Martin case, the self-defense case of Zimmerman into the mix as to why we shouldn't have it. Which I say, if you take that power away from me, then you got to give it to somebody else. And that means a criminal on the street will have it. Georgia, as you well know, has never had a duty to retreat. Never.
Absolutely correct.
Never. Even before it was a colony, we didn't have the duty to retreat. When it became a colony, we did not have the duty to retreat. And we do not have it now, and we plan on keeping that. That one, I believe, will not go anywhere as well. There's one other, SB 67. Wait a minute. There's another one besides this one. SB 67 prohibits carrying firearms in the government building, which is trying to chip a little bit off of HB 60 last year. That one is by Emmanuel Jones, and I don't expect that to go anywhere. There's also SB 68, which is a training bill for the Senate, same basic thing.
Corollary to the House bill we discussed.
That's correct. I don't expect that one to go anywhere.
And then there's HB 73, which allows police to detain a person to determine if they have a carry permit.
Well, let's talk about 73 in just a second. We are coming up on a commercial break, so folks, stay tuned. When we come back, we'll discuss why the police should not be able to just pull you over for driving a car. We'll be back in just a minute on GeorgiaCarry.org radio.
now, back to GeorgiaCarry.org Radio with Doug and Jesse King.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to GeorgiaCarry.org Radio, and we're here this week with Executive Director Jerry Henry, and we've been discussing all of the bills that are underneath the Gold Dome right now, including this absolutely terrifying bill, Jerry, that allows the police to detain you for doing something lawful.
That's correct.
I mean, that's trust me, I've been on both sides of prosecution and defense, and this is the most terrifying thing I've heard in decades.
Well, as you know, the Supreme Court has come down on the side that that's unconstitutional on numerous occasions since dating back to the 60s, I believe. So it's unconstitutional to begin with. We put it in, we codified it into law last year in HB 60 because of the fact that there were so many law enforcement people around Georgia who didn't believe that to be the case. And they would go ahead, if they saw you, then you're going to have to, depending on where it is and who you are, you may bite some concrete. But they want that power over you. If they see, matter of fact, Sheriff Seals up in Putnam County, I think, well, he made the statement that if he sees a thug walking down the street with a firearm, then he can't go ask him, well, number one, how's he know he's a thug?
Yeah.
But regardless, that I agree, detain, it's an illegal search and detain, and should not be allowed.
It's the functional equivalent of saying we can pull you over when you're driving just because you're driving a car and you might not have a driver's license.
That's correct.
And this is...
Or you might be drunk, but you're not weaving, but you might be drunk.
This is a terrifying prospect. When I lived in Alaska, we couldn't even do a roadblock, which, you know, many states, including Georgia, allow roadblocks to check every single driver because it's not specific. This is a specific. Alaska wouldn't even allow you to do that because you had to have probable cause to stop somebody, or at least reasonable articulable suspicion that there was a crime being committed to be able to do this. And here, we're trying to throw everything in the Constitution out the window and open up a door to the police being able to say, papers, please.
That's correct. They want to actually open up the door that we closed last year and let that same animal back out.
It's a terrifying prospect. Now we've got a segment right now, Jerry, we're going to do every week called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Now, the good we've kind of touched on already.
Right. HB 186, that was a bad bill when it came out. We contacted members. Everybody got active, and we turned it into a good thing because we reminded the legislators. As a matter of fact, even Alan Powell, who's the committee chairman of Homeland Public
Homeland Security and Public Safety.
Public Safety, Homeland Security Committee, whatever it is. He knows who he is. He made the statement in the hearing that he would like to thank all the Second Amendment groups for reminding him that we're still out there and we're vigilant.
I think that is you know, the gentleman from Georgia's way of saying that he took notice of something.
Yes, he did.
We can't let him forget.
There were a lot of people that did that, and that's what you have to do. And the good thing is that our members were notified, they responded, and we got something done. That was for the good thing.
At the end of this segment, we'll talk about more how you can get to be a member so that you can get these notifications. Right. So there's the good. We've got good people in the legislature who are responding. We've got good people out there who are calling. What's the bad this week, Jerry?
Well, the BATFE. The ATF wants to ban M855 ball ammo. Just because they think it's dangerous, I guess. They call it armor piercing, which is, you know, it might be depending on how close you are, but it's not a round that's used normally against the police. It's the most popular sporting rifle in the country.
It's a rifle ammo, right?
Yes, they have a pistol now, but it looks almost like a rifle. It looks like an AR-15 without out of stock on the back of it, but it isn't a normal type pistol that you or I would normally carry. Doug would, but
Doug
we know how Doug is. But most people wouldn't be carrying one around on the streets. And we have our comments posted on our website as to why we think it's illegal, why it shouldn't be done, etc. And we would like everybody to go look at that and then contact the ATF and tell them that we don't want this.
Jessie was telling me some of the comments on her drive into the station this morning, and I think that she had some really great points that she was pulling off the Georgia Carry website.
It's one of the things on the Georgia Carry website. One of the comments in it was that to be classified as armor piercing, it has to have a jacket that weighs 25% of the projectile weight.
And it doesn't.
It doesn't.
No.
It's not fully jacketed either. That very end is
Open.
Right.
steel
So-
painted green
Yep.
and not copper, which means that it's not fully jacketed.
Yeah.
It's also designed for use in a rifle, not really a handgun, and it has specifically saying by the ATF standard that it has to be designed for a
And this
handgun.
is just
Yeah, this
ATF
is
trying to
just- yeah.
shoehorn again
That's
because
all they're doing.
Because you look at the whole designation of was it designed for a rifle or a pistol, that goes just clean out the window. You have rifle rounds that are anemic compared to a Smith & Wesson 500.
If you cut to the chase, it's this administration trying to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. It's that simple.
They can't take
If
our
they
guns
do
away, so
away,
they're going to take
and
away
what
the
has
ammo.
what has happened right now is that's the most popular ammo for AR-15. It is sold out on shelves, and it has doubled in price since they announced this, and that's what they're doing to us. And I think that something should be happening to that. But at any rate, that's the bad.
Okay, now
Get
we got
involved and let's do something. And now we got the downright ugly.
The ugly.
We talked about the ugly earlier.
That's House Bill
HB
331.
331, which requires training in order to obtain a GWL. This is a bill that was put in by Representative Dexter Sharper.
This story
And-
made me laugh so hard when I read it.
And this gentleman last year, when HB 60 came up, he voted against it. He did not want you to have the right to carry a firearm anywhere you wanted to, basically. So after it passed, he's sitting around one day and he goes, I don't really want to be the only one in the room without a gun if something happens, so I'm going to get a Georgia weapons license. He goes and gets one. He gets him a 380.
But he's a
And
convert, Jerry.
He's
We
a
should be happy.
convert, except for one day.
Now he's
Now, when he gets it, he says, duh, I don't know how to use this thing. I know. I need training. But instead of me going and getting training that I'll get a law passed that everybody in Georgia is as ignorant as I am on guns and gun laws when I got my weapons license. So now I'm going to force them into the same kind of training that I think they should have.
So because he failed to get somebody to show him how to use his firearm,
correct.
I have to take a training class?
That's correct.
No thanks.
Yeah.
This is
because he now knows better.
This is typical anti-freedom thought, and it boils down to the old adage, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If I have to do something, why not make everyone do
That's
it?
correct.
Because everybody is the same. When you look at all of humanity as being the same, having no difference in ability, no difference in education, no difference in opinion, then you get laws like this where they
That's
want
correct.
to lower to the lowest common denominator. Instead of embracing people's differences, embracing unique opportunities and education levels, and in truly embracing individualism.
I mean,
Well, it's
taking
also-
Doug King and making him take a gun safety course would
Oh, yeah.
it would be like making Picasso take an art class.
Sure.
In elementary school.
That's correct. But it's also, as we discussed earlier, it is a method of gun control. If you price people out of the market. Now, in this one, he's going to price the sheriff out of the market because he wants the sheriff to give it free of charge. But the people in that county are going to pay for it, no matter what. So
what's going to end up happening is the sheriff isn't going to be able to do it.
That's correct.
They don't have the resources for that, and so this is going
and
to
then
become,
you'll be lined up forever trying to get a course so you can go get your license.
And then all the people that didn't get it within 120 days get that little statutory fine put on them. What was it, $25 or $35
Yep,
or
something
whatever?
like that.
So it becomes a money racket for the state rather than a necessity for law-abiding citizens.
I mean, it'd be like you're talking about people standing in line. I envision bread lines in Russia
Sure.
or healthcare lines in Massachusetts.
Well, it would.
So, folks, we are almost out of time. We have had so many different bills to talk about today, and we really thank Jerry Henry for being here to guide us through all of these different bills. But the most important thing anyone can do is to get involved in GeorgiaCarry.org. And the way to do that is to reach out through their website, GeorgiaCarry.org. We've been saying it all day here, haven't we, Jesse?
Yes, we have.
And you can go there and you can sign up for your membership. You can also go to just about every gun show in the state and see a Georgia Carry member working for free, volunteering, out there, getting the word out, getting people signed up. And you can talk to them and get pamphlets and get in more information. All the information's online. The information's available at gun shows. The information's available just by reaching out. You can go to info@georgiacarry.org, or you can contact us at radio@georgiacarry.org if you have any questions at all. But on top of that, you get, not only do you get a membership in an organization, you get information to help you get involved, but you know that you're a part of something bigger than yourself, and you are moving forward with a group of over 7,000 people people, trying to enact better laws across this state. One other thing that we would ask you to do, as this is our inaugural show, we are being carried by stations across Georgia. And we would, if you are listening to us on a podcast on the GeorgiaCarry.org site, or if you're listening to a download off of the internet of this broadcast, and you're not listening to us on a local station, contact your local stations and tell them you want to hear GeorgiaCarry.org radio every week. They can reach out to us at radio@GeorgiaCarry.org for all of the information to be able to carry this show on your local station so that you can listen to us every week, get the most interesting news and topics brought to you about Georgia, about guns, about politics, about things that are important to your lives. Right, Jesse?
That's right.
You know, we also go to most of the festivals that we have around here. The Moonshine Festival, just any festival, Hummingbird Festival down in Hogansville, any festival that we can get into over the states, we go to.
Well, this is an important opportunity to be able to change your lives, to be able to change the laws, and to get involved. Folks, this has been GeorgiaCarry.org Radio. Tune in next week for another exciting broadcast.
This has been GeorgiaCarry.org Radio with Doug and Jesse King. GeorgiaCarry.org is Georgia's no-compromise voice for gun owners. Tune in each week for valuable information on protecting your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. GeorgiaCarry.org